My husband thought I was blind. So every night, he brought his mistress into our bed, laughing, whispering, mocking me to my face as if I didn't exist. What he didn't know was this. My sight returned a week ago. Tonight I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I simply handed them a glass of celebration wine. And as I calmly began describing every detail they believed I could never see, their throats froze. When I lost my vision, everyone assumed I lost my life. They were wrong. I lost distraction. Darkness sharpens everything else. Sound becomes precise. Silence becomes meaningful. You learn how lies breathe. You learn how guilt changes the rhythm of a room. First, my husband was gentle. Too gentle. His voice softened when he spoke to me. He told friends how brave I was, how strong I had become. He took control of things I used to manage. Bank calls, appointments, schedules, calling it help. Help slowly became control. Then comfort arrived. And comfort breeds carelessness. It started with unfamiliar footsteps at night. Not loud enough to be obvious. Not quiet enough to be accidental. A different laugh. A perfume that didn't belong to my home. I told myself I was imagining it. That's what people do when they don't want the truth. Then came the whispers. She can't see anyway. They said it like it was permission. They didn't bother hiding. They performed. Jokes were told right beside me. Insults disguised as humor. My presence reduced to furniture. I lay there silently, learning more than they realized. Because blindness doesn't mean absence. It means observation without interruption. I learned how often they came. I learned her name. I learned how my husband's voice changed when he lied. I learned which side of the bed they avoided because they thought sound traveled differently there. They were confident. Confidence is loud when it thinks it's safe. A week ago, everything changed. The doctor asked me to look toward the light. I did. And the world bled back slowly, first a shadow, then shape, then color. Your sight is returning, he said gently. I didn't tell anyone. Not my husband. Not my friends. Not my family. I wanted to see one thing clearly before anything else. Who they were when they believed there were no consequences. For 7 days I watched. I watched her enter my room like it belonged to her. I watched him stand taller when he thought I couldn't see his reflection in the mirror. I watched the cruelty settle comfortably on their faces. And with every detail, something inside me went quiet. Not numb. Precise. Tonight I decided it would end. Not with drama. Not with shouting. With truth. They arrived as usual. Confident. Careless. He didn't even lower his voice anymore. She laughed openly. They thought blindness had erased accountability. I greeted them calmly. I went to the kitchen and poured 3 glasses of wine. Nothing special. Nothing dangerous. Just ordinary wine. Celebration, I said lightly as I handed it to them. They smiled. Then I raised my glass and began to speak. I like your coat, I said casually, turning toward her. That deep blue suits you better than the red one you wore last Thursday. The room stilled. My husband laughed nervously. What? I continued. And you, I said, looking directly at him. Always touch your cufflink when you're about to lie. The left one. You've done it since college. Silence slammed into the room. Her smile cracked first. I didn't stop. I described the chipped nail polish she kept fixing when she was nervous. The scar on his wrist he thought no one noticed. The way the bedside lamp reflected them both in the mirror they believed I couldn't see. The glasses shook in their hands. Because details don't accuse. Details confirm. You're lying, he whispered. I smiled gently. No, I said. I'm seeing. That's when fear arrived, not loudly but deeply. She stepped back first. People who intrude always retreat first when truth stands up. My husband stayed. You planned this, he said. No, I replied. I prepared. There's a difference. I told them calmly that I had documentation, dates, patterns, statements, medical confirmation of when my sight returned, quiet recordings of conversations they thought were safe, not as threats, as facts. Facts don't need emotion. She left without another word. He sank into a chair, the weight of certainty crushing him. What happens now? He asked. That, I said, depends on how quietly you leave. He left that night. No shouting, no begging, because some defeats don't invite arguments. The house felt different afterward. Not empty, honest. The next days were quiet. Messages came from people suddenly concerned, friends who wanted explanations, relatives who wanted clarity. I gave none. You don't owe explanations to people who benefited from confusion. The legal process moved the way serious things do, slowly, calmly, permanently. No public spectacle. No rumors worth repeating. Just resolution. Someone later asked me if I felt satisfied watching them freeze. I thought about it. Satisfied? I said. No. Then what? Aligned. Because the real moment wasn't when they realized I could see. It was when I realized I didn't need to prove anything. Blindness didn't make me small. It made me attentive. I learned how people behave when they think they're unseen. I learned how cruelty sounds when it doesn't whisper. I learned who someone becomes when they believe accountability doesn't apply. And once you learn that, you don't argue. You don't beg. You don't explode. You exit. My sight returned, but the real vision came earlier. The night I stopped pretending not to know. The night I stopped explaining pain. The night I chose clarity over chaos. People think revenge is loud. It isn't. Revenge is watching someone realize too late that the power they abused was never theirs. I didn't hurt anyone. I didn't poison anyone. I didn't threaten anyone. I did something far more lasting. I let the truth stand where lies had lived comfortably, and I walked forward without looking back. That's how it ended. Not with tears. Not with screams. With a woman who could finally see clearly and refused to ever go blind again. The morning after felt different. Not dramatic. Not hollow. Clear. Sunlight filled the room in a way it never had before. Not because it was brighter, but because nothing was hiding anymore. No whispers. No tension vibrating under the surface. No pretending. I stood by the window for a long time, letting my eyes adjust, not just to the light, but to the truth of what my life now was. Quiet. And for the first time, that quiet belonged to me. People assume the hardest part is confrontation. It isn't. The hardest part is what comes after. When there's no enemy left to focus on, no betrayal left to analyze, no anger left to justify your stillness. Just you. And the choices you delayed while surviving. I walked through the house slowly, noticing details I had ignored for months. The scratches on the floor. The photos on the wall I no longer recognized as memories, but as evidence of how long I had tried to make something broken feel whole. I took some of them down. Not angrily. Carefully. That day I didn't rush to call anyone. I didn't announce anything on social media. I didn't explain myself to friends who suddenly wanted the full story. I made coffee. I sat at the table. And I breathed without bracing. That's when I realized something important. I wasn't waiting anymore. Not waiting for an apology. Not waiting for regret. Not waiting for understanding. Waiting is a habit you form when you think someone else controls the ending. They don't. The days that followed were uneventful in the best way. The kind of uneventful that lets your nervous system finally rest. Paperwork happened quietly. Arrangements were made without emotion. Doors closed where they needed to close. And with every small practical step, something inside me settled. People asked me later how I stayed so calm. I told them the truth. I wasn't calm, I said. I was done. There's a difference. Calm still negotiates. Being done doesn't. I never confronted her again. Not because I was afraid, but because I had already seen everything I needed to see. Once someone shows you who they are when they think you're powerless, no conversation adds value after that. My husband tried once more to speak. Carefully, politely, as if tone could undo behavior. I listened without interruption. When he finished, I said only one thing. I believe you believe that. And then I stood up. That was the last conversation we ever had. Weeks later, my sight continued to strengthen. Colors sharpened. Depth returned. But what surprised me most wasn't how much I could see. It was how much I no longer needed to. I stopped scanning rooms for danger. Stopped listening for footsteps that didn't belong. Stopped preparing explanations for feelings I didn't owe anyone. Freedom isn't loud. It's spacious. One evening, I caught my reflection in the mirror and didn't feel the urge to correct it, to brace it, to apologize for it. I looked like someone who trusted herself again. That trust mattered more than justice ever could. People love dramatic endings. They want shouting, exposure, humiliation. But real endings don't perform. They resolve. Mine resolved quietly, decisively, without cruelty. Because the truth is, I didn't need revenge. I needed alignment. Alignment between what I knew and what I tolerated. Alignment between what I saw and what I accepted. Alignment between who I was becoming and what I refused to carry forward. They thought blindness made me weak. It didn't. It removed distractions. Taught me patience. Taught me listening. It taught me how people behave when they think no one is watching. And when my sight returned, I didn't use it to destroy anyone. I used it to leave. That's the part they never expected. Not exposure. Not punishment. Departure. With clarity. With dignity. With a future no longer negotiated through silence. I don't tell this story for sympathy. I tell it because someone else is lying in a room right now, being underestimated, being mocked, being erased quietly. And they think survival means enduring. Doesn't. Survival means seeing clearly and choosing yourself the moment you can. My sight returned. But the real miracle was this. I never lost my vision again. Time moved differently after that. Not slower. Not faster. Just honestly. I began doing things without announcing them. Rearranging my days. Relearning my preferences. Choosing silence when noise was offered. Choosing distance when familiarity tried to return wearing apologies. I realized how often I had explained myself before. Why I was quiet, why I needed space, why certain things hurt. Now I didn't explain anything. Because the right people don't need explanations. And the wrong people don't deserve them. My eyesight kept improving, but something else improved faster, my instincts. I trusted them again. If something felt wrong, I didn't debate it. I stepped away. If something felt peaceful, I stayed. Peace became my filter. There were moments when memory tried to pull me back. A smell, a sound, a laugh that echoed too closely to the past. But those moments no longer controlled me. They passed. That's how I knew healing wasn't happening loudly. It was happening correctly. Someone once asked me if I regretted not reacting sooner, not exposing them publicly, not making it messy. I thought about it carefully before answering. No, I said, because reacting would have given them importance. Preparation gave me freedom. That's the difference no one talks about. Anger ties you to people. Clarity releases you from them. I learned that dignity doesn't come from being believed immediately. It comes from believing yourself long enough to act with certainty. The night I handed them the wine wasn't about confrontation. It was about confirmation. Confirmation that I wasn't imagining things. Confirmation that silence had been a strategy, not weakness. Confirmation that when the moment came, I would choose myself without shaking. And I did. Life after that didn't become perfect. It became simple. I laughed more easily. I slept without bracing. I spoke less but meant more. I noticed how much energy I had wasted trying to keep peace in places where respect didn't live. I stopped doing that. And the strangest thing happened. The world adjusted. People treated me differently. Not because I demanded it, but because I no longer negotiated my boundaries. When you stop explaining, people start listening. Or they leave. Both outcomes are acceptable. I don't wonder what they tell themselves now. I don't imagine their regret or their justifications. That curiosity belongs to an earlier version of me. The version who thought understanding was required for closure. It isn't. Closure is a decision. And I made mine the moment I realized this truth. Seeing isn't just about eyes. It's about refusing to unsee what you already know. They thought blindness erased my awareness. They thought silence erased my strength. They were wrong. Silence trained me. Darkness refined me. And when light returned, I didn't use it to burn anyone. I used it to walk away intact. That's how the story truly ends. Not with justice announced. Not with revenge satisfied. But with a woman who saw clearly, chose herself calmly, and never again accepted a life where she had to pretend not to know the truth. And once you reach that point, nothing can blind you ever again. The quiet kept holding. That surprised me. I expected it to crack one day, to be interrupted by regret, by doubt, by some delayed wave of emotion I hadn't dealt with yet. But it didn't. It stayed solid like a floor that finally stopped shifting under my feet. I began to understand that peace isn't something you feel all at once. It's something you notice over time. I noticed it when I no longer flinched at unexpected sounds. I noticed it when I stopped replaying conversations in my head, searching for things I should have said. I noticed it when my body stopped bracing before my mind did. That's when I knew the danger had passed. Not outside me, but inside me. People who hadn't seen me in a while commented on how different I seemed. Not happier. Not sadder. Just steady. You seem lighter, someone said. I smiled because that was exactly it. I wasn't carrying explanations anymore. For so long, my life had been built around accommodating other people's comfort. Staying quiet so no one felt accused. Staying still so no one felt threatened. Staying blind so no one felt exposed. I don't live that way now. I learned something important from losing my sight and then getting it back. You don't actually need vision to know the truth. But once you see it clearly, you can't pretend it isn't there. That pretending is what exhausts people. That pretending is what breaks them slowly. I stopped pretending. I stopped pretending that love without respect is still love. I stopped pretending that cruelty softened by humor is harmless. I stopped pretending that silence keeps the peace. Silence only protects the person who benefits from it. One afternoon, I found myself laughing, really laughing, at something small and unimportant. And halfway through it, I realized I hadn't laughed like that in years. Not freely. Not without checking who might hear me. That realization hit harder than the confrontation ever did. Because it reminded me how much of myself I had shrunk to survive. I don't shrink anymore. The world didn't end when I chose clarity. It didn't punish me for leaving. It didn't demand explanations I wasn't willing to give. Simply made room. Room for mornings that start without tension. Room for evenings that don't feel staged. Room for a future that isn't negotiated through fear. I don't tell this story because it's shocking. I tell it because it's quiet. Because somewhere, someone is living in a space where they're being underestimated, talked around, laughed over. Someone is being told, directly or indirectly, that their awareness doesn't matter. And they're starting to believe it. I want them to know this. Awareness doesn't announce itself. Strength doesn't always shout. And clarity doesn't rush. But when it arrives, it doesn't leave. My husband thought blindness made me powerless. He thought silence meant ignorance. He thought the dark protected him. He was wrong. The dark trained me. It taught me how to listen without interrupting, how to wait without weakening, how to prepare without being seen. And when the light returned, I didn't use it to destroy anything. I used it to choose myself. That choice didn't come with fireworks. It didn't come with applause. It came with something better. A life that no longer asks me to doubt what I know. A body that no longer reacts before it thinks. A mind that no longer negotiates with disrespect. This story doesn't end with revenge. It ends with authority. The quiet, unshakable authority of someone who knows what they saw, knows what it cost, and knows exactly why they will never go back. That's the ending. Not dramatic. Not cruel. Just permanent. And once you reach that place, no one can ever make you blind again. I stopped counting the days after that. For a long time, I had measured my life in before and after. Before the accident. After the darkness. Before the truth. After the night everything changed. One morning I realized I wasn't doing that anymore. The past had stopped organizing my present. That's when I knew the break was complete. I began to trust my own rhythm again. I woke when my body felt ready, not when anxiety pushed me out of sleep. I ate when I was hungry, not when routine told me to. I spoke when something mattered, not when silence felt dangerous. Those are small things. But small things rebuild a person. I noticed how different the world felt when I walked through it without apologizing for existing. I didn't rush to make others comfortable. I didn't soften my tone to avoid being misunderstood. I didn't explain my calm so it wouldn't make people uneasy. I let them feel uneasy. That wasn't cruelty. That was honesty. People who had known me before struggled with the change. Some tried to pull me back into familiarity, old roles, old expectations, old versions of myself that required less accountability from them. I didn't argue. I simply didn't step back. Distance isn't punishment. It's information. It tells you who can meet you where you are, and who only liked you when you were easier to manage. The house slowly became mine again. Not because I redecorated, but because it stopped holding secrets. Every room felt honest. No corners carried tension. No silence carried another meaning. Silence became rest. Sometimes I would sit in the same place where everything once happened and feel nothing. No anger. No sadness. Just awareness. And awareness, I learned, is peace without denial. I never wondered if they regretted it. Regret is about them. Closure was about me. I stopped asking questions that didn't improve my future. I stopped imagining conversations that would never give me what I needed. I stopped waiting for acknowledgement from people who had already shown me who they were when they thought I couldn't see. That version of them was enough information. My vision kept improving, but I no longer tracked it obsessively. Whether my eyes were perfect or not no longer defined my power. I had learned something more reliable. I trusted myself. That trust changed how I moved through everything. Decisions came faster. Boundaries held without effort. I didn't need rehearsed explanations or backup plans. When you trust yourself, you don't need witnesses. There's a strange relief that comes when you realize you don't need to win anything. You don't need to be proven right. You don't need the story to land perfectly for everyone who hears it. You just need to live in alignment with what you know. That alignment became my anchor. I learned that dignity doesn't come from being believed immediately. It comes from refusing to abandon yourself while you wait. And I waited well. Not for apologies. Not for justice. But for clarity. And when it arrived, I didn't rush. I didn't weaponize it. I didn't turn it into spectacle. I used it quietly. That's what unsettles people the most. Not anger, not confrontation. Calm certainty. The kind that doesn't need to announce itself. The kind that doesn't return. The kind that says, I see clearly now, and I'm done negotiating with what hurts me. That's how the story truly settles. Not in the moment they froze. Not in the words I spoke. But in everything that came after. The steadiness. The silence. The life that no longer required me to pretend. My husband thought blindness made me powerless. He never understood this truth. The moment I stopped pretending not to know, I was already free. And freedom doesn't shout. It walks forward. Unbothered. And irreversible. That's where I am now. And that's where the story finally rests. The stillness stayed with me. Not as emptiness, but as confirmation. I used to think silence meant something was missing. That it needed to be filled with explanations, reassurances, noise. Now I know better. Silence is only uncomfortable when you're still running from yourself. I wasn't running anymore. Days passed without markers. No countdowns. No milestones tied to pain. I stopped expecting memories to ambush me. When they did surface, they felt distant, like stories I once lived. Not wounds that still lived in me. That distance mattered. It meant the power had shifted completely. I began trusting my own reactions again. If something felt off, I didn't rationalize it. I didn't wait for proof. I didn't ask permission to step away. I stepped away. That instinct had been there all along. I had just been taught to doubt it. The night I handed them the wine wasn't the moment I changed. It was the moment I stopped resisting the change that had already happened. People often confuse endurance with strength. They think surviving quietly means you're weak. That patience is the same as passivity. It isn't. Patience is restraint with purpose. I didn't reveal my sight the moment it returned because I needed drama. I waited because I needed certainty. I needed to see their behavior in its purest form. Unfiltered, unguarded, unafraid. And they gave it to me freely. That knowledge didn't make me angry. It made me finished. Finished explaining. finished negotiating, finished hoping people would become kinder if I waited long enough. Hope is powerful, but only when it's directed inward. I redirected mine. Life after clarity isn't flashy. It doesn't announce itself with grand gestures or triumphant speeches. It settles into habits, into mornings that don't start with dread, into evenings that don't require emotional armor. I slept better, not because everything was resolved, but because nothing was being ignored. There's a deep rest that comes from alignment, from knowing your thoughts, your actions, and your boundaries are no longer arguing with each other. I live there now. Occasionally, someone would ask me how I found the courage to do what I did. I always paused before answering, because courage wasn't what carried me. Recognition did. The recognition that love without respect is not love. The recognition that silence that protects cruelty is not peace. The recognition that seeing the truth and staying anyway is a choice, not a virtue. Once you recognize that, courage becomes unnecessary. The decision makes itself. I didn't rebuild my life with anger. I rebuilt it with precision. I removed what didn't belong. I kept what did. I didn't rush to replace anything. Rushing is what people do when they're afraid of being alone with themselves. I wasn't afraid anymore. I became selective with my time, my energy, my trust. Selective isn't cold. It's careful. It's what you become when you've learned the cost of access. And the strangest thing happened. The more selective I became, the lighter life felt. I laughed when something was funny. I cried when something deserved tears. I didn't suppress reactions or amplify them for effect. I was simply present. That presence was my proof. Proof that I didn't need revenge. Proof that I didn't need validation. Proof that I didn't need anyone to freeze in fear to feel powerful. Power had already arrived quietly when I stopped pretending not to see. My husband thought blindness had erased my agency. He thought silence had erased my awareness. He thought darkness had erased my strength. He was wrong on all three counts. Darkness refined me. Silence trained me. And sight, when it returned, only confirmed what I already knew. I don't carry this story as a warning. I carry it as a reminder that the moment you trust what you see, really trust it, you don't need to destroy anything. You just stop allowing it to exist in your life. And that ending is permanent. The truth is, the story didn't end when everything became quiet. It settled. There's a difference. Endings feel sharp. They announce themselves. They demand attention. What happened to me was slower, deeper, like something finally sinking into its rightful place. I stopped rehearsing conversations in my head, stopped wondering what I would say if I ever saw them again, stopped imagining explanations that would never change anything. That mental space opened up like a room I didn't know I had. And in that space, something unexpected grew. Self-respect without performance. I didn't need to look strong. I didn't need to prove healing. I didn't need to show anyone how okay I was. I simply was. The world responded differently to that version of me. People listened more closely. They didn't interrupt as often. They didn't push boundaries to see how far they could go. When you stop negotiating your worth, others stop testing it. That realization changed everything. I began making decisions faster, not impulsively, but confidently. I no longer waited for discomfort to become unbearable before acting. The moment something felt wrong, I trusted that feeling. That trust had been missing for a long time. Blindness hadn't taken it. Fear had. Fear of being wrong. Fear of being dramatic. Fear of losing what little peace I thought I had. Ironically, it was fear that kept me trapped, not darkness. Once that fear dissolved, I felt free in a way I never had before. Not euphoric, not reckless, grounded. Grounded people don't rush. They don't chase closure. They don't look back hoping someone finally understands. They move forward, quietly. I learned that cruelty thrives on two things: secrecy and tolerance. The moment either disappears, it loses its power. My sight returning removed secrecy. My silence ending removed tolerance. Nothing else was needed. I don't replay the night with the wine anymore. It's no longer vivid. It's no longer sharp. It's just a memory, a turning point, not a trophy. The real transformation happened afterward, in the days no one saw. The mornings where I chose calm instead of rumination. The afternoons where I didn't explain myself. The nights where I slept without bracing for the next betrayal. That's where freedom lives. People often misunderstand stories like mine. They expect rage. They expect bitterness. They expect some version of, "I'll never trust again." They don't understand this truth. Trust didn't die. It became selective. I still believe people can be good. I just no longer believe that access is automatic. Access is earned through consistency, respect, and honesty, especially when no one is watching. That standard protects me now. Sometimes I think about how confident they were when they thought I couldn't see, how relaxed cruelty looked on them, how easily they mistook silence for ignorance. That thought doesn't anger me. It reminds me how dangerous assumptions are. Because the moment someone assumes you are powerless, they stop hiding. And that's when you see everything you need. My husband believed blindness had erased my authority. He never understood this. Authority doesn't come from vision, comes from self-trust. The moment I trusted what I knew instead of questioning it, everything aligned. My actions matched my awareness. My boundaries matched my values. And when that alignment happens, there is no going back. I didn't rebuild my life loudly. I didn't announce a new beginning. I just stopped participating in what diminished me. That's the most permanent ending there is. No revenge. No spectacle. No destruction. Just a woman who saw clearly, chose herself without hesitation, and never again accepted a life where truth had to whisper. And that's where it stays. Stable, quiet, unshakable. Because once you reach that place, nothing and no one can ever make you blind again. The peace didn't fade. That was the part no one warned me about. People talk about healing like it's fragile. Like one wrong memory, one unexpected message, one familiar sound will crack it open again. But real healing isn't glass. It's stone. It forms slowly, layer by layer, until it's strong enough to carry weight. I felt that strength growing in ordinary moments. When I made decisions without explaining them. When I said no without softening my voice. When I didn't feel guilty for choosing myself first. Those things used to feel impossible. Now they felt natural. I stopped framing my life around what had happened to me. I stopped introducing my story to myself before I introduced my day. The past stopped being the headline and became background context, important but no longer in control. That's when I understood something crucial. Trauma doesn't end when the danger leaves. It ends when your body believes it's safe again. And my body finally believed me. I noticed it in how I walked, no longer cautious, no longer scanning. I noticed it in how I spoke, direct, unguarded, unafraid of silence after my words. I noticed it in how I rested, deep, uninterrupted, honest. Rest is the loudest proof of safety. I began reconnecting with parts of myself I had muted to survive. Music I stopped listening to because it made me feel too much. Hobbies I abandoned because joy felt irresponsible in the middle of uncertainty. Dreams I postponed because stability seemed more urgent than fulfillment. One by one they returned. Not dramatically, gently. I didn't rush to rebuild a new life. I let my life grow back into itself. That patience mattered. It meant nothing felt forced. Nothing felt like performance. Everything felt earned. Sometimes people asked if I ever missed the person I was before. I thought about that. I don't miss her, I said. I understand her. Understanding is kinder than nostalgia. That version of me did what she had to do with the tools she had. She endured. She observed. She waited until the moment came where she could act without destroying herself in the process. Waiting wasn't weakness. It was strategy. The night I handed them the wine wasn't about revenge. It wasn't even about exposure. It was about alignment, the moment my inner knowing matched my outward action. That's when everything clicked. Before that night, I knew the truth but lived around it. After that night, I lived from it. That shift changes everything. I didn't become colder. I became clearer. I didn't become distant. I became selective. I didn't become guarded. I became grounded. Those differences matter. I learned that dignity doesn't require witnesses. It doesn't need validation. It doesn't even need acknowledgement. It only needs consistency. And I was consistent with my boundaries, with my values, with my refusal to pretend. People who benefit from your silence will always be unsettled when you become calm instead of compliant. Calm has weight. Calm doesn't argue. Calm doesn't chase. Calm decides. I don't tell this story to shock anyone anymore. I tell it because it's honest. Because somewhere, someone is being underestimated right now, mistaken for unaware, mistaken for weak, mistaken for blind in ways that have nothing to do with eyesight. I want them to know this. You don't need to announce your awareness. You don't need to confront the moment you realize the truth. You don't need to react to be powerful. Sometimes the most decisive move is preparation. Preparation gives you options. Options give you control. And control, quiet, steady control, is what changes the outcome. My husband thought blindness made me powerless. What it actually did was remove distractions, strip away illusions, and sharpen my perception. When my sight returned, it didn't create strength. It revealed it. And once revealed, it couldn't be taken away. I live differently now, not louder, not harder, but truer. I don't negotiate with disrespect. I don't explain boundaries. I don't stay where I have to shrink to be tolerated. That's the real ending. Not a confrontation. Not a collapse. Not a dramatic exit. But a woman who sees clearly, trusts herself fully, and walks forward without carrying what never belonged to her in the first place. And once you reach that place, no darkness can ever take your power again. What stayed with me most wasn't what they did. It was what I stopped doing afterward. I stopped shrinking my reactions, stopped editing my words, stopped wondering if I was too sensitive for noticing what was obvious. That kind of self-doubt is taught. And once you unlearn it, life changes quietly but completely. I realized how much energy I had spent making myself easier to betray. Softer, quieter, less visible. I thought that was love. I thought that was patience. It wasn't. It was accommodation. And accommodation is dangerous when it replaces respect. After everything ended, I didn't rush into anything new. I didn't try to prove I was healed by moving fast or smiling wider. I let stillness do its work. Stillness teaches you who you are when no one is watching. I learned I liked my own company again. I liked the sound of my own thoughts. I trusted my decisions without asking anyone to confirm them. That trust was new and precious. People sometimes expect survivors to come back hardened, cold, bitter. I didn't. I came back clear. Clear about what I would never tolerate again. Clear about how silence can either protect you or erase you. Clear about the difference between love and access. Access is earned. Love is mutual. And respect is non-negotiable. The night I handed them the wine is no longer vivid in my mind. The fear on their faces faded faster than I expected. Shock doesn't last. But the calm I felt? That stayed. Because calm that comes from truth doesn't leave. I don't track their lives now. I don't imagine their regrets or their explanations. Those thoughts don't belong to me anymore. I returned them. What I kept was something better. A life where my awareness is honored. A home where no one whispers around me. A future where I don't have to pretend not to see what hurts me. Blindness didn't take my power. It trained it. It taught me how to listen without reacting. How to wait without weakening. How to prepare without revealing myself. And when my sight returned, I didn't use it to destroy anything. I used it to choose myself without apology. That choice didn't need witnesses. It didn't need revenge. It didn't need drama. It needed courage, the quiet kind. The kind that doesn't shout. The kind that doesn't threaten. The kind that simply leaves when respect is gone. That's the ending. Not a scream. Not a collapse, but a woman who finally saw clearly and never again agreed to live in the dark. The calm didn't disappear. That's what finally convinced me this was real. Not a phase, not shock, not delayed emotion waiting to crash in later. Real peace doesn't rush you. It doesn't demand expression. Just stays. I stopped measuring my life by how far I was from what hurt me and started noticing how close I was to what felt right. The shift was subtle but permanent. I chose conversations that didn't require armor. I chose environments where my presence didn't need translation. And most importantly, I chose myself without turning it into a performance. There was a time when I thought strength looked like endurance. Staying. Tolerating, waiting things out until they softened on their own. I was wrong. Endurance without dignity is erosion. What I learned instead is this. Real strength is recognizing the moment patience turns into self-betrayal and stopping there. That night with the wine wasn't about humiliation. It wasn't even about exposure. It was the first moment in a long time where my inner truth and my outer action finally matched. That alignment changed everything. Before that night, I knew what was happening but lived around it. After that night, I lived from what I knew. And once you do that, there's no undoing it. I didn't rebuild my life by adding things. I rebuilt it by removing what didn't belong. I removed excuses. I removed tolerance for cruelty dressed as humor. I removed the habit of explaining my pain to people committed to misunderstanding it. What remained was simple and strong. I trusted myself. That trust made decisions easier. It made boundaries effortless. It made silence peaceful instead of heavy. When you trust yourself, you don't need constant reassurance that you're doing the right thing. You already know. Sometimes I think about how confident they were when they thought I couldn't see. How relaxed betrayal looks when it believes it's invisible. That memory doesn't hurt me. It educates me. It reminds me how dangerous assumptions are. and how powerful awareness becomes when it's underestimated. I don't carry anger forward. Anger requires attachment. I carry clarity. Clarity requires nothing from anyone else. My husband thought blindness meant weakness. He thought silence meant ignorance. He thought darkness meant safety. He was wrong. Darkness sharpened my perception. Silence trained my restraint. And when light returned, I didn't use it to burn anything down. I used it to walk away whole. That's the ending people don't expect. No shouting. No revenge. No spectacle. Just a woman who finally trusted what she knew, acted without fear, and chose a life that no longer required her to pretend. And once you reach that place, you don't need closure from anyone else. You become it. That's where the story rests now. Quiet, grounded, unshakable. Because the moment I stopped pretending not to see was the moment no one could ever make me blind again. And that was the moment I understood something I wish I had known earlier. Not everything that ends needs noise. Some things end the second you stop lying to yourself. I didn't wake up one day feeling victorious. I didn't feel powerful in a way that begged to be seen. I felt settled. Settled into the truth. Settled into my body. Settled into a life that no longer required me to pretend I didn't notice disrespect. The house stopped feeling haunted by memories. It became just a house again. Walls, light, silence. And silence no longer felt like something I had to survive. Felt like rest. I didn't replay the night anymore. Not the wine. Not their faces. Not the moment realization hit them. Those images lost their charge because they had already served their purpose. They gave me confirmation. And confirmation is the last thing you need before letting go. People sometimes think closure comes from explanations, long talks, apologies, confessions that finally make sense of everything. They're wrong. Closure comes when your actions finally match your knowing. Mine did. I didn't need to punish anyone. I didn't need to be believed by everyone. I didn't need the story to sound dramatic enough to justify my leaving. I knew, and that was enough. The greatest change wasn't external. It was internal. I stopped negotiating my worth. Stopped softening boundaries to make others comfortable. Stopped confusing patience with love. Love doesn't ask you to disappear. Respect doesn't require blindness. And silence is only peaceful when it isn't hiding the truth. My husband thought my blindness erased my power. He never understood this. Power isn't in what you see. It's in what you refuse to ignore. The darkness didn't weaken me, clarified me. It stripped away distractions, illusions, and excuses. It showed me exactly who people become when they think there are no consequences. And when my sight returned, I didn't use it to expose them. I used it to exit cleanly. That's the ending. Not rage, not revenge, not collapse. But a woman who saw clearly, chose herself calmly, and walked away without carrying shame that was never hers. I don't tell this story because it's shocking. I tell it because it's quiet. Because somewhere, someone is still pretending not to see what's hurting them, thinking endurance is strength and silence is safety. It isn't. Seeing the truth and choosing yourself, that's strength. And once you do that, no one can ever make you blind again. The end.